Hi, everyone, and welcome to this month's podcast with the lovely Briana Picardo. She's going to have a word with Thomson, and we're going to talk about anything that comes to mind, but more importantly, a word that's important to her, a word that resonates with her, a word that's brought her down, something that's really important. And we're just going to see where the conversation takes us. Briana is an absolutely amazing woman. She's a mega mind. She really is. Don't play it down, Brianna. You really are. And she's written a very good book called Make Good Trouble, which was featured in Psychology's magazine.
Mhm.
And she's the founder of goodtrouble.co, which I've only just heard about. So tell me a little bit more about this.
Of course, Dawn, and I'm so pleased to be joining you on this wonderful podcast. Good Trouble Co. is this amalgamation of all of the ideas in the book Make Good Trouble. So it's a space for good troublemakers, people that are interested in disrupting the status quo, disrupting their lives for good. And I think sometimes we think about disruption as being loud and out of control sometimes, and something that feels unwieldy. But the good thing about disruption is it can be gentle, intentional, a choice. And so Good Trouble Co is a space for that. And all of the work I've been doing all of the over the years to help organizations disrupt their thinking, coaching and kind of working with individuals, artists, creatives, entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs. Good Trouble Co will become this community and space for good troublemakers. And the very last thing I'll say about it is I've created good trouble archetypes. So there are these little archetypes of good troublemakers, inspired by the book, because the book, as you know, kind of explores a bit of the tarot and tarot archetypes and kind of these traditional, archetypal characters that we've seen in Greek mythology, we've seen in different wisdom traditions that embody these different kind of traits and ways of being. So Good Trouble Co will be launching these archetypes for people to really think about what is my style and approach to disruption, whether or not that's in a leadership role or within my group of friends or within my family system, relationships. And so that's Good Trouble Co.
Sorry, right? This podcast, right? Everyone, this podcast is now going to be about this because I love a find your archetype card and all that.
Yay!
I'm so into it. I'm like, who am I? What would I be? And so, is this? I love the thought, and I don't know if I'm just nicking your word. What would your word be? Is it trouble? Is it disruption? What's your word for today?
I think my word is aplomb because I think sometimes, and I don't know about you in my life, because I've been a troublemaker, a good troublemaker, disruptive, simply by being myself, by asking questions, by being curious.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, I'd get a kind of not necessarily defensive, but I'd get a response to it and go, I didn't think what I was asking was that disruptive. I was just asking a question. And I think the kind of idea of aplomb is kind of yes, embracing that. There's some kind of style to that. There's a signature to it. It lands in a way that, we embrace. We're leaning into our good troublemaker because I think disruption in its nature, again, can feel really sometimes people respond to that in a kind of way where it feels aggravating or it feels like it's unwanted, but actually leaning into the troublemaking side with a bit of aplomb is how we can do it.
Boom, mic drop, a plum. And I love a game of Scrabble, and a plum. I'm like, how much does that make? That's not quite a 7 year, it's not quite a 7 letter word, but it's a
No.
fantastic word, and I love it. And so, you know, when you think about your history as a woman and as a
Yeah.
black woman,
Yes.
literally sometimes just being a black woman is enough to make people feel like we're going to disrupt in a bad trouble way as
Yes.
opposed to a good trouble way.
Yes. I agree. And I think it's so interesting, our own experiences of being in the world, being in Scotland in particular. And I came here as a student. I've been here my entire adult life. I've had the wonderful experiences of, setting up organizations, working in the arts, being bold, having a bit of gumption is a really positive thing. I've been supported in that. I think being in Scotland in the time that I have with the rise of social innovation, data, business for good has been incredible. But yes, I think that really kind of jarring experience at times, and there's so many beautiful things about being a woman, being a Black woman. But yes, you can be in a situation where you're just being yourself and people are threatened or, responding to you in a way and you think, what's going on here? Why is my presence aggravating someone? And we know why, but I think as well, being someone that's a little bit happy to kind of be a little bit disruptive, but also being a person that can be disruptive simply by existing, of course, can be a really jarring experience. And I think there's real beauty to it, and there's real beauty to it in our world. The global majority is the majority of the world, but being in a place where one is the minority or kind of less kind of there's fewer of us or less of us around. Yeah, I think like that's a big part of my own lived experience. Though it's something, and we've talked about this in the past, Dawn, I think it's something I wasn't always conscious of until later years in my life because I grew up in a city that was very multicultural, that was very Black. And also I think there are two things happening too. My own experience of growing up in a city that was really diverse and multicultural, I didn't necessarily think about my Blackness. I was just myself. I just existed. I was allowed to express these different versions of myself. And I
Yeah.
think at the same time, being in a new country, and choosing to be here as an adult, there's a lot of freedom to that. I could be whoever I want. I felt accepted. I felt supported. I felt like I was really accepted because, who I was supposed to be was not something people could project onto me as an American. It was, oh, she's American first. But also, I think our ideas of Blackness, particularly over the last few years with Black Lives Matter and with other things that have happened, there's still some sometimes narrow ideas of what it means to be Black that can be projected onto us. And as you're saying, this idea of being the unknown, people are afraid of the unknown, being something people aren't used to. Yeah, they can project all sorts of ideas, stereotypes, things that are not true onto us. But I also think that's balanced with that, parallel of the freedom of choice, but also kind of living in a world that, yes, has all these preconceived notions. And, racism comes into that, and also our own history in Scotland around that. But I think, yes, that notion of being disruptive by simply existing is something that I think is part of the core work of my life's work, of kind of not coming to terms with that, but understanding that. And I think sometimes we don't know the impact we have on other people until we see a reaction or a response. And then we think, oh, what's happening here?
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And it's that feeling as well, I think, of, going back to what you said about aplomb, about being yourself unapologetically. And I think that brings in that kind of feeling of aplomb that
Yes,
you can be like, yes, I am a Black woman, whatever you consider that to be.
exactly.
But, you know, a big bit of my work, well, it always has been, as you know, that kind of defy categorization, make your own box. Like, don't make a box, make just live.
Yeah.
And I feel like, is that where making good trouble and disruption lives for you as well, and for what you're showing people?
100%. And I think I've had the real beauty and joy of being part of the creative industries and being amongst artists. And I think, I'm around people that are constantly building their own path, that are following their own vision, that are leaning into their creativity, that center their creativity, that design their world around it. And yeah, this notion of, and I also have to really thank younger generations, Gen Z, and kind of the younger generations of growing up in a world where, to them, and I think to me, we're in a time of great change and disruption.
Yeah.
Our kind of relationship to our political institutions, to society more widely, to data, to information, relationships, all of our kind of existing structures are shifting and they will have to. And I think that can be a really confusing thing for young people coming of age in this time period. But also, what we're seeing is this willingness to kind of not worry about boxes, not worry about labels, not worrying about existing structures, making our own way. And I think in that uncertainty is the beautiful kind of creativity and kind of real courage to be ourselves that we're seeing a lot of young people embrace. It doesn't mean it doesn't come with the other side of it too, the confusion, uncertainty, and maybe a feeling of kind of fear as well. But I think that's where the beauty is. The beauty is in the chaos and the mess. And yes, I think making good trouble is about embracing the uncertainty, the mess, and the chaos. Because I've got this quote that I like that's on my keychain: chaos maketh the muse. The chaos, through the chaos comes our muse, our inspiration. It doesn't mean it's comfortable, it doesn't mean it feels good, it doesn't mean it's fun, but I think kind of embracing that uncertainty, being on the path and on the journey is a big part of it. And back to the book, Make Good Trouble, the first chapter starts with the tarot card of the Fool. And this kind of card, so there's a particular tarot deck that was really famous, the Rider-Waite tarot deck. But we call it now the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck because Pamela Coleman Smith, who is an incredible illustrator, mixed race, Black woman, born in New York, came to the UK, illustrated this tarot deck that has some images that are iconic now. And that image she illustrated of the Fool is this jester-like character standing on one leg, stepping off what looks like a cliff into the unknown. And they're willing to be a fool for life. They're willing to take the risk. Maybe it looks foolish what they're doing to someone else, but that kind of notion of being open, of play, of being open to uncertainty, of being open to falling, and actually, but knowing the path will appear once they take that step, comes into that energy of what I'm talking about with Gen Z and kind of younger generations. Yes, it's uncertain. Yes, it feels boundless, but being open to it, being open to being made a fool, not in a way that we think of that's judgmental, but a fool in terms of playfulness and being happy to kind of not take ourselves so seriously, given this what seems like a massive, massive step forward that we don't know where that's going to take us, is the spirit of making good trouble, being a bit mischievous, being a bit cheeky, being happy to not be so serious and to worry about what other people think, I think is a big part of that energy. And I'm still learning. I try and embody it every day. Am I good at it? No, but I try. Yeah.
do, so do you think, because, there's a lot of anxiety in the world, and,
Yes.
and do you, how much of making good trouble and disruption, I know you're talking about, the fact that you've got to be playful with the energy and the not knowing and stuff, but, anxiety is all about trying to deal with the not knowing
Yes.
in a very fearful kind of way. And so, how much of the disruption is about living with the discomfort rather than trying to alleviate the discomfort?
It is 100% about living with the discomfort. And I'm really curious about this from your perspective too, Dawn,
Mm,
and your work and all of the
mm,
people that you work with. We've
mm,
obviously seen, particularly in the last 10 years, what we've called a rise in a mental health epidemic. And, I don't know if we want to call it that necessarily now, but I remember about 10, 15 years ago, that was how we were talking about it. We were talking about kind of social isolation, the rise in tech. We are living in incredibly destabilizing, uncertain times, climate crisis, geopolitical changes, AI, machine learning. We're moving into these horizons of the unknown,
mm,
the growth of wealth inequality continuing to grow. Um,
mm,
and I think when it comes to disruption, the fun thing about all of this is it's not comfortable. And I think a lot of us avoid discomfort, right? I mean, why would we lean into it? We want security, we want certainty. Certain people and personalities maybe like a little bit more of adventure and are happy with discomfort, but we're not designed as human beings to be okay with discomfort. Especially if we think about our survival brain, we think about our nervous system, the kind of autonomic nervous system that is
mm,
designed for patterns that we recognize. It's designed for doing things that keep us safe. that kind of fear kind of response kicking in. We
Yeah.
think about stress responses kicking in, our body literally going, I don't know what that is. I don't like that. I'd like to stay over here, even if we know that's stopping kind of positive change and growth. And I think when we see kind of all of this language that has evolved over the last decade around mental ill health, and also the beauty of people talking about mental health more and that being more out in the open, we've seen so much work happening around nervous system regulation, around
Mm,
people really diving into trauma and understanding trauma,
mm,
about kind of our mental health. How do we kind of support and manage that? The rise in kind of diagnoses of neurodivergence, not because there's more of it, but because a lot of people, particularly women, particularly women of color, have been diagnosed late, kind of weren't kind of diagnosed early on in life. And I guess what I'm
mm,
getting at with all of this is we have this kind of collective societal language, therapy speak at times, which I'm not saying is negative or positive, but is good to kind of label these things, kind of talk about how we can ground ourselves more. And I think all of this is in response to the increasing uncertainty that we have in our lives and in our world and in our relationships. But I think exactly that Make Good Trouble is exactly what you said about living with it, living with the uncertainty, but not trying to solve it, address it, because we know that's part of the journey. And I think that as we continue on as a society, as a humanity, as we're kind of moving into this incredible 21st century, because we're only a certain few decades into it, there's going to be even more change. It's going to come even more quickly.
yeah.
And I think the movements we're seeing to return to nature, to, grow our food and vegetables, to be in community, are some kind of grounding reactions and responses to this. And I think we do have to find ways to live with the discomfort because that is life. No matter how much we think we're in control and we can plan things, we know that actually, if we remove one little thin layer, we don't really have any control. We can control ourselves, we can control our choices and decisions, but kind of that external world and environment, we're in response to it. We're in kind of communication with it. We're in relationship to it. It doesn't mean we have no control, but I think that that kind of living with that uncertainty, and I said, I'm not great at it. I also continue to learn. But I think I've been a person that's been more willing to kind of take risks and not worry about what comes next, not in a reckless way, but in an open way. But as I get older, that kind of tolerance has changed. So I think it's also about how we're managing this and moving through this at different points in our life too.
So, what's different for you as you've aged in that respect then? What's your tolerance level become? Has it widened or has it, like most people say as they get older, it's got narrower?
Well, what did they say about age and wisdom? And I think they go hand in hand, but there's a lot of wisdom for people at different points in their life and younger people as well. But I have noticed my window of tolerance has changed. And I think that's simply because I've been around longer, I've had more experiences. My brain's going, oh, we've seen this before. And it's kind of almost training myself to go, yes, we've seen this before, but this might not be the same outcome. So actually, how do I hold that lived experience, that previous experience and knowledge, and still stay open? And I think in many ways I do, but my body's changing. My kind of understanding of my own mortality is changing. Like time feels different. My experience of time feels different as I age. And I think that I'm responding to my environment too. I've noticed though, in certain ways, I care more. In certain spaces, I care less about what people think, or I'm more certain about following my own path. But I think what's been really interesting when you were talking about earlier, anxiety, I'm also seeing more collective anxiety. I think anxieties I had when I was younger, or my friends or family and people had when I was younger, came from a very different place.
Mm.
But I think kind of the approach as I'm getting older and those changes that I'm seeing as I'm getting older are also allowing me to kind of fall back on tools that I have, whether or not it's breath work, meditation, journaling, reflection,
Mm.
speaking to trusted people, speaking to elders. But some of those people are also moving on as well. So I think there's so many ways that kind of that awareness is changing. But I'm curious, what's your experience been?
In terms of in terms of the unknown, I
Yes.
really think that it's been a kind of, because systemic frameworks are crumbling. Thank
Yeah.
you, all the people and the gods and everybody that's managing this, because they're all starting to die.
Yeah.
It's really reminding us that we've got to, it's ourselves. The strength comes from ourselves. And I think this is kind of what I'm hearing with the aplomb and the fact that, and the fool, the fool's taking the step because
Yeah.
he knows he's got something within him that the road will rise to meet him. So
Yeah.
it's not him stepping into a crevasse and falling and getting,
Yeah.
destroying. And I think that whereby, so, it was my birthday yesterday, and the clock is ticking away, and Gen Z's a good bit away from me. You know what I mean? I'm Gen X, proud to be a Gen X until I get a bit stiff. But it's that thing of, I don't think we are relying on the frameworks, societal frameworks, as much as people would have done 30 years ago, 40 years
Exactly.
ago, because we see that they're not fit for purpose. And so it really does behove us to know that we've got all the information and that we've got everything that we need individually, so that
Yeah.
our tribe sees us. And then, like you say, the community, which is the antidote to the anxiety and the depression, the community becomes a living, larger thing than it's
Yeah.
been allowed. Do you know what I mean? It's been overshadowed by this kind of, to me, this huge framework that society's constructed to help white dudes. And
Yeah.
and now
Yep.
everyone's going, even the white dudes are going, well, some of that are not right.
This isn't
So
working.
it's not
It's a faulty
working.
foundation. It's a faulty
It's
foundation.
a faulty foundation, as you say. And
Mm.
actually the response
Mm.
with that we're seeing from mental health is in response to that. It is not working. It's inhumane.
Yeah,
And there's different, I almost think neurodivergence is kind of showing a different way of being. It's like it's not that anymore.
exactly.
There's different ways. And how do we do that as a not as an individual, but being there and showing up for the collective, in that kind of small way. It's kind of power to the people. And I feel that with
Hmm.
the new astrology coming out and
Yeah.
the age of Aquarius coming in and all
Yeah.
that, and I don't know if you know this, but on the 25th of April, Uranus goes into
Yes,
Gemini.
I'm watching that.
Girl. And for listeners and viewers who don't know this, the last time this happened, it was when the atomic bomb was thought up and launched. The time
Yeah,
before that was the American Civil War.
exactly. We're in a period of massive change and
Change,
disruption. Uranus is that planet of disruption, but to
disruption.
bring beautiful change. Yeah, I agree with you completely.
And so, as a woman who advocates and makes good trouble in
Hmm.
this severely disruptive time,
Yes.
what would you advise us all to do to make good trouble?
I would advise all of us to lean into that self-trust. And I think we are holding these incredible polarizing dichotomies, two truths at once. And I think we constantly need to be open to that. This is a time of massive uncertainty and disruption. It can feel destabilizing. Foundations are crumbling, but that also means we're going into a place of new ideas, of reorganizing, of relying on ourselves, relying on the people around us. And I
Mm-hmm.
understand that can feel scary and feel really destabilizing, but we can look to history, to civilizations, goodness, civilizations crumbling and falling and others kind of rising, the fall of Greece. We look at kind of Mayan and Aztec civilizations, ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia. The point is, because as you're saying, Dawn, this Uranus and Gemini change on the 25th of April is massive. We've had some really beautiful, huge, intense astrological signatures. Saturn has moved as well. These planets that stay in signs for 12 years, 14 years,
Mhm.
20 years are shifting. We're moving into a new
Mhm.
age. That is just part
Yeah.
of the cycle of life. It is beautiful. It will always happen at these kind of pivotal moments. And when I was saying lead into self-trust, we're watching the fall of a system, late stage capitalism. If people want to accept that, I know some people don't see it that way, but it is that has relied on us being guided into this belief of individualism, of product hyper productivity, of needing to produce for a system. And that's been really kind of individualistic. Okay, sure. And it can be separating. At the same time, how can we use that kind of encouragement to kind of go inward to develop our intuition, our self-trust, our backing ourselves while also not separating ourselves from other people. And I think it's so funny, the word community. We use it a lot, it's so important. But yeah, communities are complicated. They're
Mm.
not homogenous. We have different communities for different reasons. So sometimes I think people hear the word community and think, I'm not part of a single community. Good. You're not
Yeah.
meant to be. Your community can be
Right.
your neighbors. Your community can be people you work with. If you have children, it's kind of families and kind of young people that your children are around. It can be your own family, chosen family, but we have multiple communities. We have this beautiful ecosystem. And there's this wonderful theory around mushrooms, mycelium networks, and how mushrooms have all of these relationships underground where they communicate with each other, these networks of physical relationships, fibrous relationships, but they're diverse and they're broad and they're interconnected. And I think we can think of community as little ecosystems. So don't feel like it has to be a singular thing and it has to be one thing that you identify with always. It can be fluid. And I think in this time of great change and disruption, it's being open to things feeling a little unwieldy. They're going to, but trusting that something is growing and being built in this chaos. It's organized chaos. And this is an exciting time to be alive because, yeah, it can feel overwhelming, but in that overwhelm is beauty. And I think we hear people talk about this. I'm a real flat fan of Plutchik, I think in the 60s, came up with the Wheel of Emotions. And I know a lot of kind of practitioners use this. And he had this idea of these six core emotions, and all of our emotions kind of branch off from them. And, sometimes I hear people talk about the idea of excitement and anxiety being the same emotion to different extremes on the same spectrum. Anxiety will be there. Of course it will. And it's okay to feel anxious. But how can we also think about that as excitement? How is it also excitement because we don't know where to put it? So maybe it turns into this anxious energy, but it's excitement for what's to come. And I know this is a really optimistic view of things, but I do think, there will be uncertainty, there will be destruction, there will be things falling apart. But, in the process of creating something new, you have base materials, you build something like a ceramic pot, you're using clay, it has to go through the fire to become solid. So we're going to be walking through some fire, but just know that it's going to be forming us and shaping us. It's not going to destroy us. And I think that is what we have to sit with, that kind of, again, back to making good trouble, back to disruption. And we go through this in some of the book, kind of these archetypes of particularly the Hindu goddess Kali, who is this mother figure, but she's also the creator and destroyer. She has multiple arms. Her kind of there's a lot of Hindu gods and goddesses have two sides. So Kali has also Durga, who is this warrior energy. She is scary. She has multiple arms. She chops people's heads off. But she does this because in the name of justice, in the name of fairness, in the name of protection, and that kind of destruction and creation energy is one and the same. So that is why we can feel like sometimes we're going through the ringer. But rest assured, this is just part of that process of creation. And it's an exciting thing, even when it can get and feel overwhelming. And I think we have to kind of lean into that, throwing caution to the wind a little bit. And I think for some people that are used to relying on these structures that have existed, a certain
Mhm.
way of doing things, a clear path forward, yeah, of course that can be tricky. But
Yeah.
embracing kind of the beauty of the other side of that, which is you can still follow a path, but you can rip it up a bit or you can adjust. Not everything has to be extreme.
How, and you know what I think, and I think that's really important because actually, you know, the path was clear, but was it even your path? Or was it your
Exactly.
grandpa's path that he had to
Exactly.
wield and he was like, you know what, this is the safest path. Just do that, you'll be fine.
Yep.
So, while this is all crumbling beneath our feet, actually, was it really the path? And
Yeah.
I think what you're saying, and what I'm loving about what you're saying about these two places is that it's almost to me like a kind of double helix, or the figure eight, the
Yeah.
infinite symbol, that but right at that point before it becomes the two bits, that to me is us, right? And if
Yes.
you're holding the line,
Hmm.
it doesn't have to be one thing or the other. It doesn't have to be, oh, I support Liverpool and Liverpool's gone bust. Who am I now? I can't support
Yeah.
Everton. It's about that fluidity and seeing all along the way
Yeah.
that you can have or be all of these things. But if you hold yourself and hold
Mhm.
the line,
Yeah.
when all this stuff kicks off, it doesn't have to rock you.
I agree. It's about that dance and that fluidity that you're talking about. And I think what this all relates to as well is power and this notion of what's our relationship to power. We're
Mm.
seeing institutions crumbling that held power, that were gatekeepers of power. We're seeing figures and their ways of leading and their ways of holding power being questioned, criticized, crumbling because of their abuse of it. Power is something that I think is neutral, but I think how we use it and wield it is what kind of it influences its expression. And I know it's a strange thing to say that power is neutral. I think it's
Yeah.
infinite. It's infinite. I think power can be used in any way. Power is something that we can lean into, we can give to other people, we can grow collectively, we can feel internally, but we can also wield over. And I think that actually how we choose to use it is what really makes its impact. And I am a big, big fan of human design. I don't know how
Mhm.
much you, yeah. So
Yeah, no, a
for
bit about
everyone
that.
listening, human design is a system that was brought into being by Ra Uru Ha in the 60s or 70s. And it is a kind of archetypal system or a system or a way to understand ourselves, which is based on these different human design types. And it brings in the I Ching, astrology, lots of different systems. And there are these different kind of, if you want to call them energy types, not quite energy, projectors, reflectors, generators, manifesting generators, and manifestors. And I encourage you to explore that some more. I'm a manifester, and the thing about manifestors is that back to what we were saying at the beginning of this kind of having an impact on other people or people responding to us or being disruptive without meaning to. My aura and my energy is very much like that. I'm a disruptor, and I think human design has helped me understand this a lot more. But humans, each kind of energy type, each kind of profile has a different expression, and mine is a 6-2. And I'm just sharing this to say that I have a very structured way in some ways of living life. The first 30 years of my life were very experimental, testing things, failing, things feeling very fluid and like things were constantly changing. 6-2 types, and you can be a 6-2 of any of these kind of energy types go on after their 30s, they go onto the roof. And this notion is you go onto the roof, you kind of pull back from that experimental phase of your life. You observe, people come to you for wisdom, for advice, they come visit you, but you kind of step back. You're not in the thick of it, trying out everything and having these wild experiences. And I went on the roof several years ago. And it's been very funny for me because observing now and seeing people in different leadership roles and being able to apply my experiences for the first 30 years, which were messy and chaotic and wonderful and exhausting, comes back to this idea of power and energy. We are seeing the world and our experience of leadership and people in power really shift. And I think something we were saying about self-trust is we're seeing the fall of the guru. We're seeing the fall of that
Right,
singular leader.
right.
We've been talking about this in kind of energetic circles, healing circles for
Mhm.
decades. We knew this was coming with the change
Mhm.
into the age of Aquarius. So we're putting our faith into these singular figures that are saying they know the one path. We are
Yeah.
now trusting ourselves, our
As
own. wisdom and experience. We can
Yes.
still be guided by people, but we're not blindly putting our faith in these singular figures. And that's why we're seeing wisdom traditions, institutions, people in power, those kind of ideas around them crumbling. That's part of the
Yeah.
shift out of this kind of guru period. And I think when we're not used to trusting ourselves or listening to ourselves or waiting for our own inner wisdom or getting quiet, that can feel really destabilizing. But it's really beautiful to cultivate that relationship to ourselves and kind of find ways through the noise. And I think it's so funny and so apt and so perfect that the tension that we're experiencing in this time is noise, distraction, come
Yeah.
over here, do all these things. There's so many different, there's a paradox of choice. While actually the lesson is that we need to cultivate that self-trust and get quiet. So we're going to be, I don't believe necessarily being tested. I think we talk about, sometimes people talk about, you set out to do something and the universe then tests whether or not you're really committed to it. I think maybe that can happen, but I guess what I'm getting at is there's interference. That interference is asking you to build a bit of resilience. So yes, we're in a period of needing to cultivate that self-trust, and then we're experiencing the most interference from the outside world to cultivate that self-trust.
To
All of
make
the
us do it, to make us do it, because
exactly,
I really do believe that, as you're saying, something happens that's not the right path, and it hurts a bit. But if you
yeah,
don't learn from that, it gets bigger and it gets bigger and it gets bigger until it hurts so much you can't not. And this is why the
exactly,
Donald, I kind of thank him in a way, because he's literally what are you going to do? Are you
yeah.
really? And it's making everyone go, oh
Wait
my
a
God,
minute,
and shake up the reasonable people who are too
yeah,
reasonable to make trouble.
exactly,
Trouble. And it's going, you're going to have to, because that's the next phase. Are you really going to let this happen? So, in a way, I mean, God knows he's not, I haven't got him on speed dial. He's not my favorite guy, but what
no,
he's doing
yeah,
is such a good thing for the next phase. And it's whether we can, you were talking about discomfort and being a good thing or not. And to me, discomfort is a response to something that you
yeah,
believe or disbelieve. And it's the level of
exactly,
discomfort. And if it's jarring and jangling, and then you've got to look into that and
yeah,
look back at what you're feeling to see
yeah.
if it's a discomfort that you stretch into or if it's a leave discomfort, you know.
100%. 100%. And I think also this idea of avoiding discomfort, we sometimes can judge our emotions. We can judge our emotions as not being good. And I think kind of making a value judgment is never helpful. Good and bad emotions don't exist. But of course, anger feels angry, feels uncomfortable. I had a therapist years ago that said to me, our anger shows us where our boundaries are being violated. It's
Yes,
information. So we need to use that information. Anger is good. Anger is righteous. Anger can be justified. Anger can be inspired. This idea of inspired rage comes back to Kali, the goddess Kali and Durga. She has inspired rage for justice. Her anger comes from
it
wanting to
motivates,
find
it makes you
motivating
move,
justice.
doesn't it?
Yes. And I think there's this incredible um, researcher years ago. I quote her a lot. Her name was Elizabeth Shove, and she wrote a paper in 2003 on pro-environmental behavior change. Her whole thing was how do we get people to make positive changes for the environment? And her theory is we won't make change if it requires us to interact with these three things: comfort, cleanliness, convenience. If something's uncomfortable, uncleanly, and she literally was talking about composting and recycling, we can apply this more widely, and inconvenient, we won't do it. And actually, exactly as you said, something gets so aggravating, we ignore it, it grows, it gets bigger and bigger until we can no longer ignore it. And actually, things that are uncomfortable and inconvenient, sometimes uncleanly, we have to get our hands dirty, we have to dig in, we have to do that work. That's where the best things come, that growth,
For sure.
that perspective shift. And
For
yeah, it's going to
sure.
be mucky, but like think about this, think about our inner child, think about being younger, playing in the dirt and the
Playing
mud
in
and the
the mud.
sandbox. it's all play. It all comes back to play. We don't have to be afraid of it. But there's so much beauty to it. And I think also the phrase make good trouble, I have to speak to its originator, who was Senator John Lewis in the civil rights movement in the US.
Mm.
He talked about making good trouble in the civil rights movement of aggravating the status quo, making good trouble for good change, necessary change. So that kind of, he used that phrase a lot, and it's not a coined term. Anyone can use make good trouble, but that kind of energy of, yeah, we're going to disrupt the status quo, but the status quo needs to be disrupted.
Girl, for sure, because the status quo is not serving many
Anyone. Yeah.
people,
Yeah. It's not even
and
serving the people that it serves because
it's not. It's
what is it
holding them in a
creating?
place that they just don't want to, the fact
Yeah.
that the manosphere exists is because of this. And no one in the
Exactly.
manosphere is really enjoying being in the manosphere if they
No,
do.
they've been duped into joining the manosphere, right? When we think about the manosphere and incel culture and the incredible amount of work also in Scotland that has happened around this, zero tolerance Scotland, rape crisis Scotland, and gender have done work around this for decades. But this whole notion that yes, people are feeling rejected, deflated, feeling like they don't know what it means actually to be a man, to be masculine in this world. They don't have, but feeling that rejection, and where does that get directed towards? Okay, that gets projected onto women, into misogyny, but also these kind of thought leaders in the manosphere know what they're doing. They're channeling these like disenfranchised, angry people, feeling angry for lots of reasons, into an answer of, yeah, feel entitled to women's bodies. And that anger that kind of gets channeled into this community, which is actually exploiting these
Which
men.
again is the thing. These guys are lost and don't know what to do. So there's
Yep.
a community for them that's going, it's not your fault. It's
Yep.
just the women's fault. So
Yep.
that divestment of responsibility, which is the
Exactly.
opposite of what you're saying about making good trouble and what I do in my work, it's coming back to you. Take responsibility for
Yeah.
everything. Everything is a framework. Everything. So a lot of my work's become more about the structure of relationships and the structure of the way you
Beautiful.
think and the structure of your mind, because it can be tinkered with and it can be fixed, can't it? But if you're
Totally.
just going, oh no, it's not my fault, and I blame my mum, blame this person, but just shut up. Come on
Yep.
now.
Yeah, I agree. I
Says the
agree.
therapist who's so compassionate, just shut up. But shut up is my mantra actually for this year. It's one of those
I
things
love
I
it.
need to stop overthinking. So it
Yeah.
has been like for me, shut up, get on. Just what are we going to do with this?
Yeah, exactly.
What are we going to do?
Exactly. And we know, we can build new neural pathways, neuroplasticity. Our brains are constantly growing. But yeah, what are we feeding? What beliefs and messages are we feeding that are harmful, that are unhelpful, that are kind of moving us in a certain direction? And I love that. Shut up. What do we need to tell to shut up and refocus and focus in a different area or direction?
Look somewhere else because in that there's everything. There is
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And so we're coming nearly to the end, but I love this because I could just talk to you for like 300 years.
Me too.
But time's just a construct anyway, so that'll pass fast because we'll be yapping. But in terms of I want everybody who's listening to this to really listen to Brianna's words about playfulness and like being light with your actions and your thoughts, not getting hung up and getting into the meta emotion of I feel this, oh that's wrong, oh well that must mean this, and blah blah blah. All of that.
Yeah.
That's what you need to shut up
Yes.
and just have more fun. Get your hands in the dirt. And I kept thinking when you were talking, you can't make an omelette without breaking some eggs. You know that that's what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Can't make an omelette without breaking some eggs.
Exactly.
But I'd love to ask you, just to finish off, what have you had enough of in your life? So, I always think of Roger Murtaugh from Lethal Weapon, and he's always like, oh, I'm too old for this shit. I'm too old for this shit. And I'm like, dude, I actually wore that t-shirt on my birthday yesterday. I'm too old for this shit. What are you done with? What are you too old for now? What needs to just pass for you or has passed for you recently?
I am still working on this, but I'm so done with overthinking, with self-doubts, and also with rumination.
Oh,
And I think that we are in a moment where our anxieties are being magnified in front of us. And we also have the beautiful choice to focus our attention elsewhere.
Yeah.
And, I even think about, yeah, what media are we consuming? What are we, if we're on social media, what are we curating in our kind of search functions? What are we giving our attention to? Because we are in a moment of, yes, an attention economy. We have companies, businesses grabbing our attention constantly. But back to what you just said about can't make an omelet without cracking some eggs. What are we choosing intentionally to focus on? And how can we cultivate that even more? And how can we make the choice and the decision to prioritize play, to prioritize exploration, to prioritize joy in relationships? And if we don't choose to do that, the default is our attention is being competed for everywhere. And I think what I am done with is overthinking, ruminating, self-doubt, which is being really magnified by where I am allowing my attention to go, but not choosing. And I think it's about where can I choose to focus my attention. And it takes effort, but once we do it, and once we put those systems in place, once we prioritize those things, it becomes easy. So
Yeah.
actually making those choices now allows us to easily and easily focus our attention in the places we want to.
And that's making good trouble, isn't it?
It
Because
is.
instead of going, oh God, what's happening in America? What's happening in Iran? And they're out, oh, I'll just watch Bake Off. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that breaking that. Sorry, Bake Off. I don't mean that, but that whole just if you make yourself feel better, don't think about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it also means we can still care about what's happening in the world and make choices, if we want to protest, if we want to donate, if we want to raise awareness. But it's actually about channeling that into places where we'll have an impact that are good for us, that are kind of making change. But yeah, that kind of mindless consumption of things, which
Mm,
contributes to our anxiety and overwhelm, we can choose to prioritize how we are going to interact with these things, and we also need to give ourselves space and time and pause and solitude and reflection and
mm.
joy. So I agree with that completely.
Oh my gosh, this has been such a lovely chat. And,
Thank
in
you.
conclusion, we're basically saying, pause,
Yes,
play,
yes,
power.
yes,
There was another P you said, and I've forgotten it. Pause and power and play.
yeah,
And, just allow your focus to go somewhere helpful. That's a question I ask a lot of my clients. Is what
yeah.
you're thinking helpful? Is this helpful?
And channel the energy of the fool. Be a little foolish. Be foolish for life. Be open to the possibilities. We can be tired and jaded, but how do we channel the energy of that playful fool who's going to take that step into the unknown and trust that, as you said, the ground will rise to support them?
And you can do it with aplomb. We'll drop
Yes,
the mic.
yes,
I'm wearing my, what is it, that three-pronged hat thing, and I'm
yes,
wearing it with aplomb because I
exactly.
believe it and I'm into it and I get it.
Yes.
Oh, Brianna, thank you so much for
Thank
coming and
you.
chatting to me.
It
And
was
thank you,
wonderful.
everyone, for listening to us. We've had more than a word today. We've had amazing few words, and I hope you really get something out of it. It's been an absolute joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.